Hi, my name is Ryan Klein. I'm the founder and CEO at Market My Market.
And I'm Eric Bersano, the VP of Business Development here at Market My Market. So we're putting together this four-part series on why SEO is so challenging and rewarding in 2024. I really want to emphasize the rewarding part. A lot of comments that I hear lately are talking about, is SEO dead, or can SEO really work anymore? And if you're talking to somebody who's telling you it's dead, it's because it's never worked for them. But the people who are doing SEO correctly, this is usually their best marketing channel, meaning a lower cost per acquisition than any paid source, whether that be AdWords, social media, or even TV. So the details of how you get it to be rewarding for you is what this webinar is all about.
So let's jump into it. A little bit more of the background. So for anyone that doesn't know who I am, tuning in for the first time, maybe you mentioned SEO is dead. There's a SEO is dead and other lies podcast I've been a part of for quite some time. You should check that out if you're more trying to emphasize or unlock the secrets of SEO as it stands today. Formerly a host on Legal Mastermind podcast, but that's your gig, Eric. And yeah, I've been doing SEO for a while, so I feel like it's appropriate to join these series of conversations and be able to speak on it. Been doing SEO, which I believe is since 2010. So I've seen a lot over the past 14 years. And 14 years ago, I worked with a lot of different industries. And then just a year after that, moved on to legal for the most part. So really been doing legal specific SEO for 13 years. And I like to say that we've seen it all, but there's always something new that comes up, I feel like, every month. So yeah, we're excited to present on some of these topics because they are evolving just as they always have been.
And I'm Eric Bersano. I've been working in legal marketing since 2006. I've touched just about every piece of legal marketing that there is, whether that be TV, online, digital, even programmatic. When programmatic first came out and was starting to be a buzz with general marketing for companies like Ford and Nestle, it was something that I experimented with in the legal world. So I've always been very passionate about legal marketing. I don't think there's anything more rewarding than helping a law firm grow their business, watching them add headcount, watching their bottom line grow. So I've been very passionate about this. So even with experience in these different methodologies, this webinar will really focus more on search engine optimization, because if you're not doing it properly, it's the quickest path to a low acquisition cost for your clientele.
Absolutely. So what better way to kind of set the table than talk about how much it's changed over the past 10 years up to this point. So we both can definitely speak on this because we've seen it from different angles. You've seen it from working at some major legal marketing companies. I've seen it from working in-house. And so when it comes to content, what do you think has been really the biggest evolution besides what's stated here?
Well, I'll give you one of the biggest things so I worked at FindLaw years ago, back in 2006, and they used to have this product called a practice area center, which was basically a blog, and you could get one on truck accidents or wrongful death or DUI or whatever you want. It was the same blog that was sold over and over to clients. The only changes were the city name and the name of the firm, and they actually really worked well. So if a personal injury attorney in LA had this practice center on their page and somebody in Fort Lauderdale had it, they both ranked really well. And that probably sounds crazy to anybody who does SEO today, because we know that duplicate content is not rewarded by Google. But if you want to talk about a then versus now, that to me, there's no starker contrast of how much more sophisticated Google looks at content than wanting something that's original. And then, as we'll jump into a little bit later, something that's authoritative as far as who's written that content.
That doesn't sound crazy at all to me because of the things I used to actually do, dabbling in, I guess what you could say, black hat back in the day. Fortunately, not for any of our clients nowadays, but I think a lot of good SEOs come from exploiting and pushing some things to limit back in the day. So yeah, we used to launch directories that would basically be the same page, but swap out the city name. Launch websites overnight with 30 or 40,000 pages. And the vast majority of those pages would actually index and rank for its keywords very, very quickly. I'd say as many as 90%. Nowadays, between updates to algorithm, AI changes, Google's awareness of how people can abuse, content to that scale, I'd say that if you do anything like that nowadays, you're lucky if you can index, less than 1% of those pages. So that strategy, had its time and place, and it certainly was fun for a lot of SEOs back in the day, but it's just not going to fly nowadays.
Yeah, and Google has always said that, good content is going to be rewarded. And their tools have just gotten more sophisticated on how to tell what good content is. So everybody remembers the days of keyword stuffing, using the term car accident, lawyer 15 times in a page or more. And that was one way to kind of cook the books back in the day. Now, Google has so many more sophisticated ways to see if content is good. One of those, what they call user experience, would be time on page. So if you look at 2 car accident pages in the same city, and the average person stays on one for 2 minutes and stays on the other for 20 seconds, that is a big contrast. And that's going to be a bigger tell to Google whether that content is helpful to the searcher than any number of keywords that are put on it. So that's really what we're trying to center around, is really good SEO is giving Google exactly what they want, and kind of going on that line of how do we prime the pump to get Google to recognize this content, to see that it is better than the competition.
Yeah. So let's hop into links. So I know my first job working in SEO, I got a long list of blogs. A lot of them were mommy blogs. That's typically a joke internally with SEOs, getting backlinks for mommy blogs. But I would literally do blog commenting and social bookmarking on any website that I could get access to back in 2010, and it worked. And that does not work nowadays. Much of disappointment of plenty of SEOs. So, it's come a long way in the form of backlinks, building authority, getting people to recognize you as an authority for the topics or the subject matter that you're talking about. So I'm sure that you've seen your share of changes to link building and building authority over time.
Yeah, the thing that I always tell people nowadays, there's so many tools where you can see exactly what your competition is doing. So, the tools that are out there, and there's, dozens of them. What I tell people is, like, our team's job is to look at the links that your competitors have. And we're not just talking about links to the homepage. We're talking about deep linking. So how many links specifically does the car accident page have, or the DUI page? And when you look through that link profile, there's going to be layups. There's going to be links that we go, oh, we can get that link. That's easy. There's going to be some links that are very unique. Maybe the law firm was mentioned in a news story and they got an article and it links to there. Now, we can't get that exact link, but we know the quality of that link. And we know that we need to get something equal or better. Then there's unique links that the attorney can help us get. For example, maybe a link from your local bar association. A lot of attorneys belong to more than one bar association. Maybe your alma mater has a page, where you can list yourself as an alumni and get a link from there. Do you participate in any philanthropies? There's a lot of these places that we can help curate links from, and you may actually have a profile on one of these really high quality pages, but for some reason you're not linking back to your website. So links is definitely a necessity. It's really having a partner that you can work with that help you get creative on how to manufacture some of these links that your competition doesn't have.
Yeah, you made a great point about the brand mentions that how many times do we see that lawyers are in the community, rate settlement, they've been on local news talking about something, that's developing in the city, and they get mentions, but they don't get backlinks. And it's important for either internally or externally to have some sort of system in place to be able to do some level of outreach to be able to get that link that you're entitled to. And that's a whole other facet that's oftentimes not explored.
Yeah. I mean, I can give you a real-time example of one of the clients that I work with, e-bikes are prolific now. They're all over the place, and the number of people getting injured on e-bikes is growing. My client had someone who got a TBI from getting hit by a truck on an e-bike, got a $2.4 million award. We did a podcast on that. Somebody locally here in San Diego, a reporter, found him and is now going to interview him this week. So what you're really trying to do is, again, you're trying to give Google what it wants, which is good content. So now I have a personal injury attorney who works with people who are injured, who has a specific client that's been injured by an e-bike. This reporter, we found out, has written a couple other articles about e-bikes and dangerous intersections. So now we've married two people who can really help each other. The reporter has another story to write, and then our client gets to talk about their success in helping people who've been injured.
Let's move on to website. So I had the pleasure of coding HTML back in 2010. The majority of websites there were some content management systems. WordPress was not the most popular one. It was actually probably either Drupal or Joomla, if you remember those. And so while I would say that lightning fast does come in the form of HTML, it's just the pure code that loads the website quickly. When you're doing the level of sophistication and work on websites nowadays, you're not going to find too many developers that are comfortable and willing to update a website in HTML all the time. So that just requires the website to be built well, not bloated with a bunch of plugins and crazy videos and images, and your hosting has to be up to snuff. And those things are available, but they are critical and still get overlooked.
Yeah, and then from my perspective, one of the things I always try to coach the attorneys in is, yes, we want your website to be beautiful. We want you to be proud of it, but your website has a function to it. So we're really talking about a mix between art and science. So a lot of people will say, oh, all legal websites look the same. And to a certain degree, that could be true. But what you don't want to do is be so unique that no one knows how to navigate your website. So people are used to having the navigation buttons in a certain spot. They're used to seeing an intake form or phone number in a certain spot. So if you don't play within those rules, you become so unique that people would get frustrated with your website. When we're looking at how to differentiate somebody in their market, we are looking at their competition and trying to take the best pieces that other law firms are using, but create their own voice, create their own aesthetic so that it does differentiate them in the market. But you've got to have that balance of art and science, or your website's not going to do what you want it to do, which is bring in more business.
Sure. And hosting security is also another part of this too. So when I say secure, I suppose that's making sure the uptime is great and the load times are fantastic. But websites, more than ever, just like it feels like everything else has been scaling up as far as the requirements for being competitive. So as website being compromised by malware or hackers, and we've seen it happen. So that is another facet. You need to have that uptime. If a website is hacked and it's down for a week, I can guarantee it. Google is trying to check out what's going on, probably thinks you don't exist anymore. So you don't want that setback. So what we have here on the left is back in the day, if it was content, links, and just a good website, that probably was the criteria for being competitive. Frankly, in some cases, if you had great links and bad content, you ranked well. If you had great content and no links, you could probably still do okay. And that's just not the case anymore, especially in legal. There's a few things listed here that we didn't have to think about as SEOs back, 10 years ago. GBP, or Google Business Profile, was barely around. Maps, there was the 7-pack, if you remember that, but there wasn't like a whole lot you could do besides just get good reviews. Were we talking too much about technical SEO? Not much. Site structure could go either way. Schema information barely existed. EAT standards didn't exist. There's just a lot going on. There's a lot that has to be intact to be able to compete.
Yeah, the one thing I would say with search engine optimization, and I know most lawyers out there are really frustrated with that term because it seems esoteric. There doesn't seem like a true definition to it. If I was to give you an analogy, if you're building an engine, for a NASCAR race, you've got, a combustion engine is actually fairly simple, right? There's a bunch of moving parts in there. But if you don't do everything perfect on that engine, it's just not going to perform. If you leave out one spark plug, if the carburetor is dirty, it's not going to perform well. SEO is very similar. There are literally hundreds of tiny little things that you can do in search engine optimization. And if you don't do them all properly, if you're not doing them the way that Google expects you to do them, then your performance is going to be affected. And with search engine optimization, to the victor go all the spoils. So most lawyers I talk to say, oh, I've tried SEO. I've tried 6 different companies and SEO just doesn't work. No, you probably went from page 8 to page 3. And if you never got to page 1, you never got to realize some of those gains. So the law firms that if you do a search for a keyword that you really want to rank for and just look at the top 5 lawyers on that page, I can guarantee you they are fighting tooth and nail to stay there. They're paying a lot of money to stay there because they know that their conversion for what they're paying for each one of those leads is lower than almost any other place that they can possibly get. So having a team of people that really specialize in what they do in SEO, because SEO is broken up into a lot of different bits. There's the link building, there's the content, there's the technical aspect to the website. If you don't have specialists in all those, just like a NASCAR engine, you've got people who specialize in making that car hum. You're not going to be able to push yourself through the clutter and get to the first page.
Yeah, I completely agree. I can say firsthand, I wouldn't be able to count, at least on fingers and toes, how many times I've heard I've been top 3. I know what it feels like in this office when we're top 3. I know what it feels like when we weren't top 3. It is very evident. And I'd say it's once you experience it, I feel like we're alluding to something else, but it's like insatiable almost. It's like I have to be back in the top 3 because things were rocking when that happened. And so kind of moving into that, I think that's worth before we even enter the other conversations as far as, is SEO still, relevant? Is it still important for law firms? It is. And I'd like to just not say it and kind of back it by data that we have. So we use CallRail and we have, full transparency as far as calls come in and where they come from. Form submissions are below. We've also used integrations for chat and been able to have, again, full insight on really how things are coming in. So this is an aggregate of our clients above, and this is specifically Google Business Profile or the local. A good trend line really was actually peaking way more than it was last year as far as the average amount of calls over the past couple of months. And what's interesting about this isn't just our clients, but it's also important to kind of know how trends are working in general. With AI, what's going on? Is this generative AI going to answer people's questions so they're not going to scroll through the SERP? Is ChatGPT answering questions and referring people to legal services? And these are all things that we'll talk about later on, and we have to be prepared for it. But in the meantime, at this moment, we know that there's tried and true methods, and there's still a search behavior without a doubt for these things because it's reflected in literally what we're seeing with the data here. So as far as form submissions, the organic is still solid. And people like filling out forms mostly organically. So with the calls, they'll call from a business profile, maybe they'll land on the landing page and use the call mostly. And then the organic, however they come in, prefer to use that method of communication. So want to establish this slide that before we talk for several hours about SEO and its merits and how much we like it, we also have to know that its yield is still present. And so from our end, the trend lines are absolutely still there.
Yeah, I'll just back up with one quick thing there. We're hyper focused on how our clients are getting their clients. And we'll see in a lot of instances that the Google My Business, your local maps is really driving that. And we have attorneys that do other types of marketing outside of what we perform, but we can track that. So we know if they're doing TV or paid search or billboards, and really knowing where those clients are coming from and keeping track of it allows that firm to know where to pour more money to. And again, with some of my clients that I work with that have big budgets all around, meaning not just working with us, but with others, you can expect, if your SEO is really crushing it, to get signed cases below $1,000, for a personal injury. And I know not all personal injury cases are the same. And then in bad months, they're just over $2,000. Now, in a paid search concept, if you're doing paid Google AdWords, I've heard numbers as high as 4,500 per signed case is something that would be tolerable. If you're doing billboard advertising, are people actually calling from the billboards, or is it just to keep you in front of their mind when they do need an attorney and they recognize your Google ad? So this ecosystem of marketing for law firms, I don't think there's a bad choice, but if you're not measuring what's actually working and driving those people to your firm, you're missing out on some opportunities.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it goes back to what you said several times with SEO, amount you spend and what you benefit from. We do see that ROI being the highest once it's fully ramped. Of course, we've worked with lawyers to kind of talk about that period of time where you don't get things like the first month or the second month when a ramp up period, and then factoring in maybe some of that cost. But once it's underway and you're 12, 18 months in, it's always, from my experience, been doing this for a while, and so have you, it's always been the most cost effective. So speaking of SEO, it is important because there are at any given time literally hundreds of different tasks you can do. And the SEO strategy in the day-to-day doesn't look pretty much anywhere close to where it did 10 years ago. There's some fundamental things probably I've heard of. Meta titles are still a thing. We're not going to get into the dozens, but there are some, 8 header tags and links and content and on-page optimization. A lot of those things are going to be fundamentally similar, but the way they're executed differs. And then again, there are dozens of other tasks that are new because of the past 12 months. It can be new the past 3 months because, a huge update that happened March 5th that reemphasized EAT, which we'll have our own separate conversation about that. Adding the experience component, our team came up with 30 unique tasks just to address that part of SEO. So there is a lot of play here, and it's important to not just do SEO, but focus on what the SEO is that you're doing, because you could spend hundreds of hours on your website doing minor tweaks, but will it have the same yield as someone that knew exactly what they're doing for 48 hours? Probably not in a lot of instances.
Yeah, the things that are really important when you're trying to beat out all your other competition, because just realize that getting to the first page is your goal, and top 5 really is what's going to make a big difference. It's looking at who is there now. So let's just take a car accident page, for instance, and you do that search in your city and you see who's number 1. One of the things that you'd want to deconstruct is, okay, how many words do they have on that page? Is it 800 words or is it 2,500? How many times do they mention the keyword? How fast does the website load? Does it have images? Does it have graphics? Does it have video? And all of these things play into account. So one of the advantages that we have is, we host hundreds of websites. So we can look at trends and we can see someone who's performing really well against someone who needs improvement, and then take that knowledge into your market, do this analysis of your competitors, because we know that if we can get you into the top 5, you're going to get the phone calls, because no one just calls one person and signs up. So you need to be in the hunt. You want to get a bite of the apple. So going through this in a really systematic way from every perspective, whether that be content, link building, gap analysis from what your competition is doing, and then putting together a plan. Like what you're looking at here on this slide is a week by week plan of what the team's going to do. And just like if you're building an engine, there's step 1. You can't go to step 10 and finish the engine quicker. You have to do these things in order because they all build upon themselves.
Yeah, let's take a look at some of those specifics you mentioned as far as that gap analysis and how much detail and how much effort really has to go into, looking at a content or that main page that's going to be the responsible for ranking some of your main keywords. So, our team, here's like an example there. I mean, this is from, a user experience, potentially conversion, but also SEO standpoint about how meticulous and how detailed the team has to be in competitive markets.
Yeah, and this is really important because if you think about how many DUI pages are out there, how many car accident pages are out there, and how do you make yours unique? Well, when we do an onboarding and we're talking with a client, we ask them these important questions. So, these are the important notes of what an attorney wants to talk about. We have a do not say and say instead of. So if someone just doesn't like the phrase in other words, and they want us to say simply put, that's what our team's going to do. And this is not a static page. Every time we submit content, the attorney can give us notes, and that goes into their folder. And each page of content takes these rules into advice. If you look at the topics to avoid, for example, medical malpractice is not a personal injury that everybody does. So if I'm talking to a personal injury attorney and they go, we don't do med mal, okay, well, those are topics we're not going to write about. And then how do we get reliable content? I mean, we're talking about legal information here. How do we make sure that when we're writing on a legal topic, we're hitting that state-specific information? So we'll look up and supply these links to make sure and have the attorney vet them to say, yeah, those are great links, or oh man, that I don't know what's going on with that website, but that information is 20 years old. We can't use anything from that. So this is the detail that we go into before we write the first page of content or the first blog post, so that we know that we're going to get something that's unique and in the voice of the law firm.
Sure. And then on the back end, there's always the SEO component. There's also, we take pride in not necessarily letting SEO dictate, how we write, take away from the quality by, forcing keywords, but there is something to say about what has to be done, post approval of the content to make sure that it is competitive and actually gets visibility. Because we can write the best content in the world, but if it doesn't meet certain criteria that's based off of competitive analysis, it's never going to get eyeballs on it. It's not going to get the visitors to actual website to convert and become great clients. So tools such as Surfer SEO are a mainstay for both the content and SEO team to be sure that, they don't follow it step by step. It's not like the gospel necessarily, but there has to be a level of implementation, because this is based off of what's been working for the other, web pages that are ranking appropriately. So if this says, hey, you're at 1,100 words, but you don't have to worry about these, they're ranking below it, but the person that's number one has 650 more words. Yeah, it is maybe worth exploring. Okay, based off of some of these keywords, I've covered X, Y, and Z, but if I need another 650 words, perhaps rank better or rank for more keywords for that page, maybe I could create a subsection that's a little bit more in line with, felonies, or I didn't talk about penal code, or I didn't talk enough about like what burglary tools people are using to commit these kinds of crimes, if that's relevant. So it does give guidance within reason. We're not going to go and just start adding a bunch of SEO stuff and just completely ruin the integrity of the page, but we are going to look at this audit and then use some of the suggestions as a way to further, benefit the page and benefit the client to get the traffic they're looking for.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Everybody's talking about AI for whether it's content or, using it for SEO. And yeah, they are great tools. These tools are helping us be more efficient. But if you don't have a talented person on the other end looking at those suggestions and taking the ones that make the most sense based on our human experience, then you're going to do more harm than good. I'll give you a quick example. One of the things that AI is being used for right now to really help is to read MRIs. Now, if you take a human and compare it to an AI and you know exactly what to look for, the human is slightly better than the AI every time. But when you combine, if you let the AI do the first glance, it will typically find more issues for the human to look at. So if you're doing an MRI and they think it's in this part of the brain, the person will go in there and identify, yes, this is the problem, a small percentage more. But the AI can look at the whole scope of things and say, here are 4 spots that you should look at. And then the person, the expert, will go in there and go, okay, these 2 spots aren't a problem, but this one extra one that you pointed out, Mr. AI, that actually is an issue, and they might not have caught that on their own. The same thing happens here. These tools put all these suggestions out, and this, I'll give you a really quick example to finish up here. Credit card fraud. Now, that's something that would be a good case for a criminal defense attorney. But 99% of the searches for credit card fraud are for somebody who's had credit card fraud happen to them. We don't want to flood a criminal defense attorney with people saying, hey, someone stole my number. I think it was at this restaurant. So you've got to have this experience, this highly tuned experience combined with these tools to really go in and make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to leave it. And this will be part 1 of 4, 5, 6. We'll pick it up on the next one. But I feel like a lot of agencies and marketers alike have used AI and some of these tools as the end all be all, like the sole means of generating the product. But at the end of the day, these are all tools. They support your talented expert team to enhance their ability to do what they do. And so that mindset, I think, is a winning mindset. And these tools, AI, I think this is maybe a preface or a little bit of a conversation what's to come, but it's being used as like the premier source, and that shouldn't be the direction it goes in, because it won't work out for the long term.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. As Ryan mentioned, this is the first of several, so be on the lookout for part 2.